Welcome to Talk Treatises.
It's great to be here.
If you are joining us for the first time, the premise here is pretty simple. We try to strip away the noise of the modern news cycle. You know, the hot takes, the tweets, the constant churn, and we go back to the source code of human thought.
We're looking at professional philosophy, classic literature, the heavy hitters of history.
And we try to see what actually makes them tick. We aren't just reading summaries. We are trying to, get our hands dirty with the texts themselves.
Really dig in.
And today, we are tackling a giant. A true giant. It's a classic work of East Asian philosophy and arguably the oldest military treatise in the world. We
are talking about The Art of War by Sun Tzu.
Exactly. Now, I have to be honest with you. When I see this book mentioned these days, it's usually in an airport bookstore,
Yeah.
Sandwiched between a biography of Steve Jobs and a guide on how to fix your golf swing.
Right.
It feels like it's become, a bit of a cliche, like a collection of bumper stickers for Wall Street guys.
It has. And that is a genuine tragedy, a real shame.
Why do you say that?
Because when you reduce a text like this to a collection of fortune cookie slogans, know your enemy, win without fighting, you miss the entire architecture of the argument. You miss the brutal efficiency of the thinking.
Okay.
The Art of War isn't just a manual for soldiers or, some metaphorical guide for aggressive CEOs. It is a treatise on the management of conflict, the psychology of leadership, and the absolute efficiency of action.
So it's about more than just war.
It's about how to survive in a world that is actively trying to destroy you.
That is a much darker framing than I'm used to, but I guess it makes sense given the time period it came from.
Exactly. We have to remember where this comes from. It belongs to the wisdom traditions of the spring and autumn period of China. And this was a time of total disintegration. The old order was crumbling. States were fighting for survival.
A very chaotic time.
Utterly chaotic. And warfare was shifting from, a ritualistic game played by aristocrats to a bloody existential profession. This text influenced millennia of Eastern thought and eventually the entire world. But to understand it, we have to look at it as a whole system.
Not just picking quotes.
No.
Well,
we are going to look at the 13 chapters, but we're also going to pull in the commentary from historical generals like Sun Tzu, who was a very real, very ruthless warlord centuries later, and will rely on the specific translation nuances provided by the great sinologist Lionel Giles.
So the mission for this deep dive is to move past the quotes everyone knows and explore the actual arguments. We want to look at the brutal logic and the intricate structure of the text.
Right.
Because when you actually sit down with the 13 chapters, it's not a mystical, airy-fairy collection of sayings, is it?
Not at all. It's a technical manual. It's closer to an engineering textbook on structural integrity than it is to a book of poetry. It's cold and it's calculated.
So before we get into the gears and levers of the strategy, let's talk about the man himself. Who was Sun Tzu? Is he even real? I know with these ancient texts, authorship can be a bit slippery.
It is, and there is a long-standing debate about that. A serious one. The traditional view, the one you'll find in the biography by the historian Sima Qian, places Sun Tzu just means Master Sun.
Right. It's a title.
It's an honorific, yes. It places him as a native of the Qi state in the 6th century BC, which would make him a contemporary of Confucius.
Which is a fascinating idea, the two of them operating at the same time.
It is. But there is a critical view, championed by scholars like Ye Shuixin, arguing that the text reflects the scale of armies and weaponry of the warring states, period. So maybe the 4th or 5th century BC.
And what's their evidence for that?
Well, they point out that he isn't mentioned in the Tzuchuan, which is the great chronicle of that era. For a general this successful, you'd expect to mention.
So he might be a compilation of different strategists, a legendary figure they attributed these ideas to.
It's possible. It's certainly possible. But the text has a singular voice. It doesn't read like a committee wrote it. And the traditional biography gives us a very specific and I think very telling origin story. It describes how Sun Tzu was introduced to Ho Lu, the king of Wu.
This is the famous audition, right? How does a philosopher prove his theory to a skeptical king? Did he ask for a battalion of elite guards to demonstrate?
That's what you would expect, wouldn't you? The king has read the 13 chapters, he's impressed, but he's skeptical. He's thinking, this is all great on paper, but does it work? So he asks, can your theory of managing soldiers be applied to anyone? Can I test it?
And Sun Tzu says yes.
Without hesitation. And the king perhaps being a bit facetious or just wanting to see if this philosopher is full of hot air, asks, may the test be applied to women?
Which, in the context of an ancient royal court, seems like he's setting him up to fail. Deliberately.
It's a massive curveball. So the king brings out 180 ladies from the palace, his concubines. These are women who live a life of luxury, completely removed from violence or discipline.
The opposite of a hardened soldier.
The absolute opposite. Sun Tzu divides them into two companies, and he does something very specific. He appoints the king's two favorite concubines as the company commanders.
So he puts the people with the most social power in charge. That seems smart.
You'd think so. He gives them spears. He explains the commands. It's very simple. Eyes front, left turn, right turn, about turn. He asks them, do you understand the difference between your left hand and your right hand? Do you understand the difference between front and back?
He's stripping it down to the absolute basics. There can be no confusion.
He is being methodical, thorough. The women say yes, they understand. So Sun Tzu sets up the executioner's axis, which should have been the first clue that this wasn't a game.
A pretty big clue.
A very big clue. And he beats the drum for right turn.
And I assume, since they are palace concubines, they snap to attention.
No, they just laugh. They burst out giggling. The whole thing is absurd to them. They're in the palace courtyards holding spears, playing soldier. The king is watching, probably amused.
So the command structure has failed immediately. The general has lost control.
This is where we see the mind of Sun Tzu. And it's chilling. It really is. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't shout. He just says, if words of command are not clear and distinct, if orders are not thoroughly understood, then the general is to blame.
He takes responsibility.
He takes full responsibility. So he explains it all again. He walks them through the drills again. He makes sure explicitly that they understand what the drum beats mean. Then he beats the drum for a left turn. They laugh again. They collapse into fits of laughter. It's still a joke to them.
Okay, now what? He's blamed himself once, he can't do it again.
Now, the dynamic changes instantly. Sun Tzu says, if words of command are not clear and distinct, if orders are not thoroughly understood, the general is to blame. But if his orders are clear and the soldiers nevertheless disobey, then it is the fault of their officers.
Oh, and the officers are the king's two favorites.
Correct. Sun Tzu orders the beheading of the two favorite concubines.
Wait, that seems, isn't that counterproductive? You just executed the king's favorite women. Surely that puts your own head on the chopping block. You're insulting the monarch to his face.
That is exactly the risk. It's an incredible gamble. The king is watching from a pavilion, and he is horrified. He sends down a hurried message. We are now quite satisfied as to our general's ability to handle troops. If we are bereft of these two concubines, our meat and drink will lose their savor. It is our wish that they shall not be beheaded.
That's a very human reaction. Okay, point proven, you're hired. Please don't kill the women I love.
It is. But Sun Tzu's response defines the difference between a courtier and a general. He replies, having once received His Majesty's commission to be the general of his forces, there are certain commands of His Majesty which, acting in that capacity, I am unable to accept.
Wow. He tells the king that military authority supersedes royal desire once the commission is given.
In the field, yes. The general's authority as the loot, and he cuts their heads off.
That is incredibly intense.
Brutal. Utterly brutal. He installs the next two women in line as leaders. He beats the drum. And the text says the women went through all the evolutions, turning right, turning left, marching, kneeling, with perfect accuracy and precision, not venturing to utter a sound.
Because they are terrified.
Because they realized the reality of the situation. The game was over. The king is displeased, obviously. He's lost his favorites. But he realizes Sun Tzu's competence.
He understands the principle.
He understands the principle. Sun Tzu's made general. He defeats the Chu state, enters their capital, and becomes a legend. But that story, it encapsulates the philosophy. Clear communication, absolute discipline, and a ruthlessness that prioritizes the objective over everything else, even the king's feelings.
And it highlights a really interesting irony. We often think of Chinese philosophy, especially around this time, as valuing benevolence, scholarship, peace. Confucius is all about right relationships and harmony.
Right.
And yet, this same civilization produced the most enduring, cold-blooded text on war in human history.
It is ironic, but also consistent in a way. The commentators on the text, people like Cao Cao, who strung the commentary together, they saw war as a necessary tool of the state. It wasn't about bloodlust. It was about restoring order. If you have to fight, you do it efficiently so you can get back to peace as quickly as possible.
Right. So let's get into the text itself. It opens with chapter 1, laying plans. Some translations call it the calculation. And right off the bat, Sun Tzu raises the stakes. He says, war is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin.
He's stripping away all the glory, all the romance. He's saying, this is dangerous. And because it's dangerous, you cannot step into it without calculation. The central thesis of this first chapter is that the general who makes many calculations in his temple before the battle is the one who wins. The victory is decided before a single sword is drawn.
So the battle is theoretically won before the army even leaves the capital. It's a matter of data analysis.
Ideally, yes. It's about having better information and a better model. He introduces the 5 constant factors. These are the variables you have to calculate. First is the moral law.
Moral law sounds a bit like morale, but I suspect it's deeper than just, are the troops happy?
Much deeper. It's the accord between the people and the ruler. It isn't just popularity. It's a kind of ideological indoctrination. Are the people willing to follow the leader into danger? Are they willing to die for the cause?
Wow.
If the moral law is strong, the people are unified with the leadership to the point where they ignore their own survival instinct. Sun Tzu is asking, have you engineered a culture where death is preferable to disobedience?
That's a heavy concept. Then he lists heaven and earth. That sounds almost mystical.
It does, but it's very practical. Heaven is the environmental factors, night and day, cold and heat, the seasons. You don't march an army into the northern steppes in winter. That's ignoring heaven. It's about timing and climate.
And earth?
Earth is the physical geography distance. Danger, open ground versus narrow passes. Is the terrain favorable? Will it take you 10 days or 100 to get there? It's the chessboard itself.
Then he lists the commander and method and discipline.
Right. The commander must have 5 virtues: wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness. Notice the tension there. You need benevolence and strictness. You have to care for your men, but also be willing to execute them like he did with the concubines.
A very difficult balance.
And method and discipline is about logistics, marshaling the army, gradients of rank, control of expenditure. It's the boring bureaucratic side of war that actually wins or loses the campaign.
And he basically sets up a checklist from this. He calls it the 7 considerations. He says, look at 2 opposing armies and ask, which ruler has the moral law? Which general has the ability? Which side has better discipline?
It's a scorecard, a premortem. Sun Tzu claims by means of these 7 considerations, I can forecast victory or defeat. He doesn't say I can guess, he says I can forecast. It's almost deterministic. If you have the data, you know the outcome.
That leads us right into chapter 2, waging war. And this is where the text gets really, really economic. I was surprised by how much accounting is in this book. It talks about ounces of silver and the cost of glue and paint.
It's the economics of conflict. Sun Tzu lists the material costs. He talks about 1,000 swift chariots, the 1,000 heavy chariots, 100,000 mail-clad soldiers. And then he says the daily expenditure will amount to 1,000 ounces of silver.
1,000 ounces of silver a day. Is that a lot for the time?
It's a fortune. It represents the total mobilization of the state's surplus. It's crippling. And he makes a crucial point. There is no instance of a country having benefited from prolonged warfare. This is the anti-crusade argument.
So no wars of attrition?
Absolutely not. War is a drain. It drains the treasury, it breaks the chariots, it exhausts the peasantry. He mentions that 70% of the people's income is dissipated. The state loses 60% of its revenue. It is an economic disaster waiting to happen.
So the goal is victory, not persistence. You want to win fast. And this leads to that famous strategy about logistics. Forage on the enemy.
Yes. And he does the math. This is what's so great about it. He says 1 cartload of the enemy's provision is equal to 20 of your own.
Why is the ratio so high? 20-1. That seems exaggerated.
It's the tyranny of distance and the inefficiency of ancient transport. Think about it. To get 1 cartload of food from your home base to the front line, you have to feed the oxen and the drivers on the way there and on the way back.
So you're consuming the supply line itself.
You might consume 19 cartloads of food just to deliver 1. It's a logistical nightmare, but if you take the enemy's food, it costs you nothing in transport. It's pure profit. You're not just feeding yourself, you're starving them.
That is brutally practical. It shifts the perspective from winning battles to managing resources. If I can eat your lunch, I'm fed and you're starving. That's a double win.
Exactly. It's about creating a cascading failure in the enemy system.
Moving on to chapter 3, attack by stratagem. This contains probably the most famous concept in the whole book. Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting.
This is the hierarchy of excellence. This is the core of his philosophy. Sun Tzu ranks the methods of war. The best method, The highest form of generalship is to take the state intact. Don't destroy it.
Because what's the point?
Right. If you destroy the country you're trying to conquer, what have you gained? A pile of rubble and a population that hates you. So, supreme excellence is winning without the messy, destructive business of battle.
So how do you do that? How do you win without fighting?
You attack their strategy. That's the second best method. You balk the enemy's plans, you figure out what they want to do, and you stop them before they start.
Preemption.
Precisely. The next best is to disrupt their alliances. That's the third best, preventing the junction of forces. Isolate them diplomatically. Make them stand alone.
And then, only then do you attack the army in the field.
Right. Attacking the army is already a failure of higher strategy. It's a lower form of victory. But the absolute worst method, the one Sun Tzu hates, is besieging walled cities.
Why is that the worst? Sieges are a staple of ancient warfare.
Because it's slow and it is incredibly costly. He outlines the timeline specifically. It takes 3 months to prepare the mantlets and movable shelters, another 3 months to pile up earthen ramps against the walls. That's 6 months of just sitting there.
While your treasury burns at 1,000 ounces of silver a day.
And your army's morale rots. And the general, unable to control his irritation at the delay, will launch his men at the walls like swarming ants, and 1/3 of them will be slain for nothing. It is a total disaster.
So avoid sieges at all costs. This chapter also gives us the famous know your enemy and know yourself matrix.
Yes. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. It's often quoted, but people forget the other 2 parts, which are just as important.
Which are?
If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. That's a 50-50 toss-up. Pure chance.
Not a good position to be in. And if you know neither.
If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. It's a call for radical honesty and massive intelligence gathering. You can't rely on bravado or national myth. You need data. Cold, hard data.
Let's dive deeper into the mechanics of this. Chapters 4 and 5, dispositions and energy. This is where the text starts to feel a bit like physics.
It really does. Chapter 4 is about dispositions, or tactical dispositions. The core idea here is the distinction between invincibility and victory. Sun Tzu says, invincibility lies in the defense. The possibility of victory lies in the attack.
Can you unpack that? Because usually we think of the attacker as the strong one, the one with the initiative.
Sun Tzu flips that. He says you can control your own invincibility. You can fortify your positions. You can organize your troops. You can hide your movements. You can make it impossible for the enemy to defeat you. That is entirely in your hands.
So you secure your own position first.
Always. But victory. Victory depends on the enemy making a mistake. You can't force victory if the enemy is perfect. You can only secure yourself and wait patiently for them to create an opening, to slip up.
And that requires so much patience. It sounds like a counterpuncher's strategy in boxing.
It is.
Yeah.
Exactly. And he uses this beautiful metaphor to describe the skilled fighter. He says a great general doesn't have a reputation for wisdom or courage.
That sounds wrong. Why not?
Because he wins so easily it looks boring. He says, to lift an autumn hare is no sign of great strength.
What is an autumn hare?
It refers to the fur of a hare or a rabbit, which glows very fine and light in autumn. Lifting it is nothing. It's effortless.
Yeah.
He also says seeing the sun and moon isn't a sign of sharp sight. Hearing thunder isn't a sign of a quick ear.
Because everyone can do it?
Exactly. True skill is winning before the problem even becomes visible to the common person. If you solve a crisis before it happens, nobody gives you a medal, nobody writes a song about you because there was no visible crisis.
Yeah.
But that, to him, is supreme skill.
That connects to chapter 5, energy. This introduces the concepts of Cheng and Qi.
This is one of the most important and, I think, misunderstood concepts in the book, Cheng and Qi. Cheng is usually translated as the direct method, the orthodox, the expected action. Qi is the indirect, the surprise, the unorthodox maneuver.
How does that play out on a battlefield? Give me an example.
Okay, so a frontal assault with your main body of infantry is Cheng. It fixes the enemy in place. They see you coming, they brace for impact, they commit their reserves. That's the expected move.
Okay.
While they're braced and focused on your Cheng attack, you send a flanking force of cavalry through the woods to hit them from the side of the rear. That is Qi. It's the unexpected blow that shatters their formation.
So the art is in the combination. You use the Cheng to engage and the Qi to win.
Exactly. And Sun Tzu says there are only 2 methods, direct and indirect, but their combinations are endless. He compares them to the 5 musical notes producing infinite melodies, or the 5 primary colors producing infinite hues. It's about creative application.
And this creates momentum. He uses that physics metaphor again. The army should be like a round stone rolling down a mountain of thousands of feet.
The potential energy converting to kinetic energy.
Right.
Yes. If you are a square stone, you stop. If you are round, you roll. You want to have your army positioned in such a way that the release of energy is irresistible and natural. You don't want to be pushing the rock uphill. You want to be kicking it when it's already at the top of the slope.
This flows right into chapter 6, weak points and strong. This feels like the philosophy of water.
It is the philosophy of water. The central concept is void and substance. You want to strike the enemy's void, their weak points, their gaps, their unprepared units, with your substance, your concentrated strength.
And avoid their strength, always.
Always. Sun Tzu says military tactics are like water. For water in its natural course runs away from high places and hastens downwards. Water avoids heights. An army avoids strength. Water shapes its course according to the ground. An army shapes its victory in relation to the foe it is facing.
War has no constant conditions. That line really stuck with me.
Right. Just as water has no constant shape, this is the death of rigid doctrine. He who can modify his tactics in relation to his opponent and thereby succeed, he says, may be called a heaven-born captain.
And this is where he talks about being formless.
Yes, the divine art of subtlety. Be invisible, be inaudible. Force the enemy to reveal their dispositions while you remain formless. If you are formless, the enemy doesn't know where to attack. They have to prepare everywhere.
And that leads to the mathematical weakness, right? If they defend everywhere, they are weak everywhere.
Precisely. If I can make you prepare your defenses for an attack in 10 different places, and I only concentrate my forces to attack one of those places, I have a 10-to-1 advantage at the point of impact, even if our total armies are the same size. I create local superiority through deception.
Let's move to chapters 7 and 8, maneuvering and variation. We get some very famous imagery here, the stuff that ends up on, t-shirts and posters.
We do. We get the elemental metaphors for how an army should behave. Rapid as the wind, compact as the forest, raging like fire, immovable as a mountain.
These aren't just poetic descriptions, though, are they?
No, they describe specific operational states. You move fast like the wind. When you stop or camp, you are orderly and dense like a forest, hard to penetrate. When you attack, it's destructive and consuming like fire. When you defend, you are solid and unshakable like a mountain.
And there are more.
Yes, he adds 2 more that are often left off the t-shirts. Dark and impenetrable as night, that's about secrecy and deception, and fall like a thunderbolt, sudden overwhelming shock.
He also talks about the psychology of the general in chapter 8, the 5 dangerous faults. This is a psychological profile of bad leadership. I want to dig into this because some of them seem counterintuitive.
It shows how nuanced his understanding of character was. It's a fantastic list. First, recklessness. If a general is reckless, he can be destroyed. He'll walk into a trap. That one is obvious. Second, cowardice. If he is cowardly, he can be captured. Also straightforward. But then it gets interesting. Third, a hasty temper. This is a big one. If a general can be provoked by insults, the enemy can control him.
That's pure manipulation. Just taunt him, insult his honor until he makes a rash mistake.
Exactly, which leads to the fourth, a delicacy of honor. Someone who is too sensitive to shame.
Now, why is that a fault? Shouldn't a general be honorable?
In a personal sense, yes. But in a strategic sense, if you are terrified of looking bad or being insulted, you might fight a losing battle just to save face. You might refuse to retreat when you absolutely should because retreat looks shameful. A general needs to be thick-skinned and pragmatic.
The objective is more important than his personal honor.
Infinitely more important. And the fifth one is the most controversial.
Which is?
Over-solicitude for his men.
Wait, caring too much about your men is a fault. That sounds like the definition of a good leader in modern management books.
In the context of supreme command in the 4th century BC, it's a liability. If you are too worried about their comfort or their safety, you won't make the hard decisions. You won't order the long march through the swamp to flank the enemy because their feet will get wet and some might get sick.
You won't sacrifice a unit to save the army.
Exactly. Sun Tzu believes a general cannot love his men to the point of paralysis.
Yeah?
He has to be able to spend their lives like currency if the victory demands it. It's a very cold calculus.
That brings us back to that benevolence and strictness balance. It's a very difficult line to walk.
It is. The hardest, probably.
Now, chapter 9, the army on the march. This section feels like a survival guide. It's so specific about reading signs, it almost feels like Sherlock Holmes, deductive reasoning from tiny clues.
It's observational tradecraft. It's what separates a veteran from a rookie. Sun Tzu tells you how to read the environment to understand the enemy. He says if birds rise suddenly from a patch of forest, there's an ambush beneath them. The birds are spooked by hidden soldiers.
Simple, but effective.
Or if beasts are startled and run from the woods, it means a sudden attack is coming. He even talks about dust analysis.
Right. I loved this part.
High and sharp dusk means chariots are coming. The wheels kick it up high. Low and wide dusk means infantry, the trudging of thousands of feet.
And he even gets into reading the enemy soldiers' body language from a distance. Soldiers leaning on their spears are faint from hunger.
Or, if those sent to draw a water drink first, before carrying it back, the army is suffering from thirst. That's a breakdown of discipline driven by desperation. If the water carriers are stealing a drink before they get it back to camp, the army is in serious trouble. It's all about looking for the small signal that reveals the big reality.
Moving into chapters 10 and 11, terrain and the 9 situations. This gets into the nitty-gritty of the geography of the battlefield. He lists 6 kinds of terrain, but I want to ask about entangling ground. What is that?
Entangling ground is ground that is easy to abandon but hard to reoccupy. Imagine a position where you can rush downhill easily to attack, but if your attack fails, you have to fight your way back uphill against a prepared enemy.
It's a trap.
It's a potential trap, yes. Sun Tzu says if the enemy is unprepared, you can sally forth and defeat him. But if the enemy is prepared and you fail, you can't get back. Disaster ensues. You have to know what kind of ground you're on.
But the real meat of these later chapters is the 9 situations or 9 grounds, and specifically the concept of desperate ground. This seems to be the psychological climax of the book.
It is one of the most powerful and, frankly, terrifying psychological tools in military history. Desperate ground is ground where there is no refuge. You are backed against a river or an impassable mountain range or an enemy fortress. There is no escape.
You know where to run.
And Sun Tzu says on desperate ground, you must fight. He gives the famous command, burn your boats and break your cooking pots.
Why destroy your own supplies and your only way home? That violates the logistics rules we just talked about.
Because it's about removing the psychological option of retreat. If you break the cooking pots, the only way you're going to eat is by taking the enemy's food. If you burn the boats, the only way you're going home is by winning.
You're manufacturing a crisis.
You're weaponizing desperation. He says if you put soldiers in a position where there is no escape, they will prefer death to flight. They will display the courage of legendary heroes like Chu or Kuei. Fear is channeled into aggression.
That's a huge psychological insight. He uses the analogy of the shuaijian, a snake.
Yes, a snake found in the Chang Mountains. If you strike its head, its tail attacks. If you strike its tail, its head attacks. If you strike the middle, both head and tail attack.
Yeah.
He says an army on desperate ground becomes like this snake, perfectly coordinated, unified by necessity.
It's interesting because he also adds a note here about how to treat soldiers. Oh, look upon them as beloved sons, and they will stand by you even unto death. But then he immediately pivots, as always.
Right, the warning again, do not let them become spoilt children. If they are beloved but useless, if they are arrogant and undisciplined because you've been too soft on them, they're no good to you. It's that constant oscillation between care and control, benevolence and strictness.
Chapter 12 is attack by fire.
This seems very specific. I mean, literally setting things on fire.
It is specific, but it shows his attention to detail. He lists 5 targets for a fire attack. Enemy soldiers in their camp, their stores, their baggage trains, their arsenals, and just generally dropping fire amongst them.
But it's not just light a match.
No, what's interesting is the environmental awareness. You need the right season, usually when the weather is dry. You need the wind to be blowing in the right direction. And he gives this piece of weather lore. A wind that rises in the daytime lasts long, but a night breeze soon falls.
So don't start a major fire attack at night if the wind is going to die out and leave you exposed halfway through the operation. Exactly. It's about thinking through the entire process. But there's a crucial philosophical point at the end of this chapter that applies to all leadership, not just fire attacks.
A warning about the spleen.
Yes. He says, no ruler should put troops into the field merely to gratify his own spleen. Spleen here means anger, resentment, a personal vendetta.
Anger may in time change to gladness, but a kingdom that has once been destroyed can never come again into being.
That's the line. You can't resurrect the dead. You can't unburn a city. So never fight out of emotion. Only fight for strategic advantage. If there's no profit to be made, don't move. If there's no danger, don't fight. It's the ultimate check on the ego of the king.
Finally, we reach the climax. Chapter 13, the use of spies.
We circle right back to economics. Sun Tzu reminds us, War costs 1,000 ounces of silver a day. It disrupts the peasantry. It causes immense misery. To remain ignorant of the enemy's condition just to save a little money on skies is, in his words, the height of inhumanity.
That's such a strong statement. Spying is humanitarian.
In his logic, yes. Because if you lack intelligence, the war drags on, more people die, the state goes bankrupt. Spending money on good spies shortens the war. That saves lives. Therefore, it's the humane thing to do.
He says foreknowledge cannot be elicited from spirits or gods. No praying for intelligence.
No superstition. No guesswork. It must come from men who know the enemy's situation.
Yeah.
And he outlines the 5 classes of spies. Local spies, which are just inhabitants of a district.
Villagers.
Right. Inward spies, who are officials of the enemy that you've bribed. Converted spies, who are enemy spies you've turned into double agents. Surviving spies who come back with news. And then there's the last one.
The doomed spy. I want to stop on this because this sounds, well, doomed. What is that?
It's the most ruthless category. A doomed spy is one of your own agents. You deliberately feed them false information. You tell them a lie, and they believe it's the absolute truth.
You set them up.
You send them to the enemy, they get captured. Under interrogation, maybe torture, they spill the secret, which they believe is true. Because they believe it, they are convincing.
So they pass a lie detector test, essentially.
Exactly. The enemy believes them because the spy sincerely believes it. The enemy then acts on the bad info, falls into your trap, and when they realize they've been duped,
They execute the spy.
the spy is doomed from the very start. They are a sacrificial pawn used to plant disinformation.
That is incredibly cold. It treats a human being purely as a mechanism for delivering a lie.
It is the ultimate calculation, the life of one agent for the success of a campaign. But Sun Tzu says the converted spy, the double agent, is the linchpin of the whole system. Because through the converted spy, you can recruit the others. You have to treat the converted spy with the utmost liberality and care.
He concludes by saying, spies are a most important element in war because on them depends an army's ability to move.
Without eyes, the giant cannot walk. Intelligence is everything.
So if we look at the art of war as a whole system, it's not really about fighting, is it?
No, it's about winning. The fighting is almost incidental.
It's about the efficient resolution of conflict in your favor.
Fighting is just one tool, and often it's the clunkiest, most expensive tool. The best tools are knowledge, speed, deception, and psychology. The text really moved warfare from being a ritual of aristocrats clashing for honor to a deadly profession of calculation.
It's interesting to compare it to Western thought, like Clausewitz.
It's a fantastic comparison. Clausewitz focuses heavily on the bloody clash, the decisive battle, the concept of the center of gravity you must destroy. Sun Tzu focuses on the avoidance of that clash until victory is absolutely certain.
He wants to win before the fighting starts.
Exactly. Clausewitz is about the collision. Sun Tzu is about the setup.
And this text traveled. It became part of the 7 military classics of China. It was translated by Jesuits in the 1700s, Father Amiot in 1782, though I've heard those early translations were a bit shaky.
They were very shaky. It wasn't until Lionel Giles in 1910 that we got a really definitive English translation that corrected the errors of previous attempts. And Giles was the one who added all those wonderful notes from the Chinese commentators like Cao Cao and Tu Mu, which give us the context we've been discussing.
It's a text that just keeps reinventing itself. Which brings us to our favorite segment of the show.
The thought experiments.
And as a quick reminder to everyone listening, these are outlandish but plausible philosophical thought experiments inspired by the work for entertainment and educational purposes only.
We are not recommending any of these.
Definitely not. Okay, scenario 1. Let's look at the doomed spy in the modern world. I'm calling this the corporate doomed spy algorithm.
I'm intrigued.
Here's the premise. We are in a high-stakes tech trade war. 2 massive companies are racing to build, say, the first true general artificial intelligence. Company A creates an AI agent. Let's call it Project Icarus. This agent holds the keys to their research, but the research is fake. It contains a research and development roadmap that is mathematically plausible but physically impossible. It's a beautiful, elegant dead end. A hallucination generated to look perfect.
So it's a poison pill. Disguises the crown jewels.
Exactly. Company A allows this agent to be captured, hacked by its competitor, Company B. Company B thinks they've stolen the secret to AGI. They pivot their entire R&D department, spending billions of years and years of time trying to replicate Project Icarus. Meanwhile, Company A proceeds with the real technology completely unchallenged.
So company B is the enemy executing the doomed spy, in this case the AI program, when they finally realize it doesn't work. But by then they've lost the war, they're bankrupt.
So the philosophical question is this: is it ethical to destroy a competitor not by attacking their market share, but by poisoning their very reality? You are using the Sun Tzu principle of the doomed spy in an information economy to destroy a competitor by letting them destroy themselves on a false path.
It connects directly to Sun Tzu's idea of attacking the mind and attacking the strategy. If you can corrupt the enemy's data, you don't need to fight them. They will march their own army off a cliff. Is it ethical? Probably not by our modern standards of fair play, but Sun Tzu would argue it is highly efficient. It saves the resources of your own company and ends the competition decisively without a messy battle in the marketplace.
Scenario 2. This one is about desperate ground. I call it the desperate ground education protocol.
Oh boy.
Premise: a university launches a new elite program for, say, theoretical physics. To get in, students must sign a legally binding contract. The contract states, if you do not pass your final thesis defense with a perfect score, your entire academic record from this institution will be permanently deleted. No credits, no degree, no transcript, and you are banned from entering any other higher education institution for a period of 10 years.
Talk about burning your boats. That is terrifying.
It is. You are completely removing the safety net. You are putting these students on intellectual desperate ground. Sun Tzu says soldiers in this position will fight with the courage of legends. They will prefer death, or in this case, academic oblivion, to flight.
The application here is to induce that same level of hyperfocus and performance in intellectual work.
Exactly. So the question is, does the removal of a safety net, the ability to retake a class or transfer credits, produce genius, or does it produce madness? Does Sun Tzu's psychology of the death ground apply to intellectual endeavors or only to physical survival?
That's a fascinating question. Sun Tzu talks about the courage of a Chu or a Kuei. These were heroes who acted out of desperation. But intellectual work requires creativity, and creativity often requires psychological safety, the safety to fail, to experiment, to be wrong.
Which this protocol removes.
Completely. If you are terrified of death, academic deletion, you might become extremely conservative in your thinking. You might not take the big intellectual risks needed for a breakthrough. You might just drill perfectly like the concubines, mastering known information, but never invent anything new.
Or the counter-argument is you might see a level of human performance and cognitive focus we haven't unlocked yet because we're too comfortable. The pressure might create diamonds.
Burn the boats. It's a terrifying pedagogical theory, but it certainly adheres to the brutal logic of the text.
Well, on that terrifying note, I think we're going to wrap up. Sun Tzu's The Art of War is so much more than just a military manual. It's a mirror for how we handle conflict, resources, and our own psychology.
And its core lesson is perhaps the most quiet one. The best general is the one who wins without fighting, and the best victory is the one that requires no praise.
Thank you for listening to Talk Treatises.